Lads, today we bring you the true level of edge, and in my opinion, the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! We are bringing you the edgiest, the cleanest, the maskiest, the Despia. Alright, let's dive into this deck profile. Starting off, this deck is not budget by any stretch of the imagination, so in advance I apologize for that. 3 copies of Aluber, the Jester of Despia. Aluber allows you, when it's normal summoned or special summoned, you can add a branded spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. If a face-up fusion monster you control is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, while this card is in the graveyard, you can target an effect monster that your opponent controls, special summon this card, and if you do, negate that target's effects until the end of this turn. You can only use one of the Aluber's effects per turn. 3 copies of Despian Tragedy. If this card is sent to the graveyard or banished by a card effect, you can add 1 Despia monster from your deck to your hand, except itself. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 branded spell or trap in your graveyard, set it to your field. You can only use 1 of its effects per turn, because otherwise it would be insane. This card would be one of the most powerful cards ever printed. But what you can do is you can use this as fusion material and get a copy of Aluber. Tragedy is one of the big starters of the deck, and we can play a lot of ways to get him out. 2 copies of Ad Libton. I have found that this card is actually insane. So Ad Libton, during the main phase, you can make all monsters on the field gain attack equal to their level times 100 until the end of the turn, until the end of the opponent's turn. That's not the effect you care about. If this card is in your hand or field and is used as fusion material and sent to the graveyard or banished, you can target 1 of your Despia monsters or level 8 or higher fusion monsters that is banished or in your graveyard and except itself and special summon it. You can only use each effect of Ad Libton of Despia once per turn. So Ad Libton is necessary. The other Despia name we're running is 1 Dramaturge of Despia. Dramaturge is crazy. So if a fusion, synchro, Xyz, or link monster is special summoned, except during the damage step, you can target 1 effect monster on the field, negate its effects until the end of this turn. If this card in your hand or field is used as fusion material and sent to the graveyard or banished, you can special summon this card. You can only use each effect of Dramaturge of Despia once per turn. And that does it for the Despia monsters. On to the branded spells and traps. So starting off, we have 3 copies of Branded Opening. So with this card, you discard a card and then take a Despia monster from your deck and either put it in your hand or special summon it in defense position. But for the rest of this turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusion monsters. If a fusion monster you control would be destroyed by card effects, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. And you can only use each effect of Branded Opening once per turn. So 3 copies of the old Branded in red. So Branded in red, you target a Despia monster or a Fallen of Albaz in your graveyard, add it to your hand, then you can apply the following effect. You get to fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials listed on it from your hand or field, but it cannot attack directly this turn. We have 2 copies of Despia Theater as a branded. Theater is basically just a field spell polymerization, but it also has a protection effect. So if a face-up non-fusion fairy monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect or is destroyed by battle, you can target 1 level 8 or higher fusion monster in your graveyard and special summon it. We're playing a single copy of Foolish Burial and a single copy of Gold Sark. These 2 cards dump Despian Tragedy, and that starts off all of your plays. So these 2 are a necessary inclusion, giving you a bunch of ways to get your plays started. Next up is 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz. I run this card because there's a lot of synergy with him in the deck. Fallen of Albaz is incredibly useful because it is a polymer, super poly on legs, and depending on what you do with some of the side deck options, this card actually can become a 2-card interruption. Next up, look, this is where this is another big pricey engine. We're running 3 copies of Water Enchantress of the Temple. This card allows you to add Rite of Aramesir from your deck to your hand. It's a great card because you're able to banishing it from your hand or graveyard. So you can discard it for free off of something like Branded Opening to trigger off plays, and then you get the free advantage, so it doesn't cost anything. This deck, the cost of fusion summoning is almost 0. And by running the adventure package, you're able to circumvent that even further. 1 copy of Wandering Gryffindor. This card is able to special summon itself if you control an adventure token.
And as a quick effect, you can shuffle this card into the deck to negate a card or effect activation and destroy the card. We're running 3 copies of Rite of Aramesir. This card will let you summon an adventure token and then activate Fateful Adventure from your deck, but you can't use the effects of monsters that are normal. You can't use the effect of a normal summon monster this turn. This can conflict a little bit, but the upside of it is much larger than the downside. 1 copy of Fateful Adventure, which lets you freely add your Wandering Griffin Rider. And then when it's special summoned, you get Draco back. That's the adventure package. I realize that this is like $400, but if you want to play this deck at the highest possible level, you need it. If you're trying to play just pure Despia, it's still going to be expensive. But without the adventure package, you can substitute it in with running things like the Dark Lords or the Dark Worlds or any other fusion bait. You can run Shadal's and Dogmatica. I've seen lists with Invoked. But to maximize the potential, we are running some hand traps. We're only running 6. We're running 3 copies of Effect Veiler and 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Monster Effect Negation is big, and I don't really care if my opponent has cards. I care more about maximizing the usefulness of my cards. So these cards just make sure that I'm able to play the game. The last engine is going to be 2 copies of Edge Imp Chain. This searches Cry for Patchwork, which searches you Polymerization. This is just to continue searching your deck. 3 Patchwork and then 2 of each. Let's go ahead and dive into that extra deck. So starting out, we're running 3 copies of Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. So Masquerade applies a cost to your opponent when it's fusion summoned. Your opponent has to pay 600 life points to activate cards or effects. That's just as a cost. So if they activate Solemn Judgment, they have to pay the initial half, and then they have to pay 600 after. So this will apply after the initial costs are paid. If this card is in the graveyard, and your opponent controls a Ritual, Link, Fusion, Synchro, or Xyz monster, you are able to special summon this card from the graveyard for free, but when it leaves the field, you have to banish it. Getting a free body to be able to stall out games can be really big in certain situations, so Masquerade is just an amazing card. Next up is 2 copies of Despia and Quarites. Despia and Quarites, during the main phase as a quick effect, you could change the attack of all monsters currently on the field to 0 until the end of this turn, except level 8 or higher fusion monsters. If this face-up card in its owner's possession leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you get to add to your hand or special summon a Fallen of Albaz or a Despia monster from your deck. Now it's time for the least used card in this extra deck, Despia and Proskenion. Proskenion is an amazing card. So the reason it's not played a lot is because it requires a Despia monster, a light monster, and a dark monster. But during the main phase, as a quick effect, you can target a Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, or special summon it to your field. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. Next up is, in my opinion, the strongest card that is available for this deck, and that would be 2 copies of Guardian Chimera. Requires 3 monsters with different names. It must be first fusion summoned and only using fusion materials from your hand and field. When this card is fusion summoned, for every card used from your hand, you get to draw a card, and for every card used from your field, you get to non-targeting destroy a card on your opponent's field. Minimum of obviously 1 each. It requires 3 monsters, and they have to be from your hand or field. And then if Polymerization is in the graveyard, this card can't be targeted. And it's 3,300. If you are running a fusion-based strategy, this card is, in my opinion, a must. Next up is 2 copies of Albion the Branded Dragon. So this card requires Fallen of Albaz and a light monster. When this card is fusion summoned, you can fusion summon a level 8 or lower monster using cards from your extra deck, except itself, by banishing the fusion material listed from the field or graveyard. So one of the things you can do is you can use a Luber with a light monster, or Fallen of Albaz with a light monster, make this by fusion summoning with your opponent's light monster, then fusion summon into a guy, the last card we're going to go over in the extra deck. When this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to set a branded spell or trap directly from your deck. Next up is just some Fallen of Albaz targets. So we've got Titaniclad, we've got Brigand, and we've got Sprind. This is for level 8 or higher for Brigand. This is for monsters with 2,500 or more attack for Titaniclad. And Sprind is just, it's a Fallen of Albaz and an effect monster special summon this turn. The last usefulness for Fallen of Albaz is 1 copy of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. And if you're playing against Dragon Link, This is the last card. This is what I'll typically summon with Albion, and that is 1 Borreload Furious Dragon. Targeting a monster you control at 1 card your opponent controls and destroying both is pretty good. The second effect never comes up, but this is just to deal with those boards. Onto the side deck. So we're running a couple of extra hand traps. So we're running 2 copies of Nibiru and 2 copies of Ghost Ogre. You just want lights. 1 copy of Feather Duster and 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. We're also running 1 copy of Red Reboot. Next up is going to be 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More and 3 copies of Evenly Matched. I don't think I need to explain the choice in these. This deck can lose to back row, so having plenty of options in the side deck is incredibly important. And that is the end of a deck profile on Despia. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, hit that like button. Subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh! And edgy BS. And until next time, lads, good fun. Have luck.